Do you often translate from your language into English while you're speaking? If the answer is yes, you're like most of my students who tell me the same thing. But it's actually one of the worst habits you can develop. So in this lesson, I'm going to show you 4 practical ways that you can start thinking in English and stop translating every sentence in your head. These 4 steps will help you speak more naturally and also reduce the number of mistakes you make. And I'll also tell you how I managed to start thinking in Spanish. Everybody needs to know this. So, are you ready? Now, if you're someone who constantly translates in your head, trust me, you are not the only one. In fact, I think almost everyone does this at the start. I used to do it too when I was learning French and Spanish. By the way, if you're new here, I'm Greg and I help you master English grammar and British pronunciation so you can speak clearly and understand native speakers easily. And when I was learning French, I studied it for years. I even went to study French at university and spent a year living in France. But for a long time, I used to think of what I wanted to say in English first and then try to convert that into French. Okay, and the result in French was a mess. And that brings me to my first point. You don't need perfect grammar. Okay? Let go of that idea. You need to be understood. And if you're constantly worried about being perfect, it stops you from actually speaking. I mean, yes, you need to learn the grammar, you need to learn the common mistakes to avoid, especially the ones I mentioned in that ebook. By the way, they are the absolutely most common mistakes that everybody makes and you must stop making right now, okay? Great book. I'll leave a link up there or in the description, or you can scan that code. But when you're speaking and actually having real conversations with people, you must not let perfectionism affect your fluency. So, relax. If the person you're talking to understands you, you're doing a great job, and this will really help you to just stop thinking in your native language. Okay, the next thing you need to do in English is focus on what you already know and don't obsess about all the vocabulary that you don't have. Just use the words you know. So if you've learned 1,000 words in English, great, that's probably enough to communicate most ideas. Just keep using them. Imagine you're visiting London and you go into a sandwich shop. You want to order a tuna sandwich and a ham sandwich to take away. But you forget how to say tuna and you don't know the grammar to form a correct sentence. So maybe you say something like, I have 2 sandwich, 1 fish, 1 ham, go. Well, guess what? You've communicated. The person behind the counter will probably understand you and probably give you what you want, and you've used the English you know. And that's great. Just simplify things. Simplify it, use the vocabulary you know, and you will feel fantastic. Okay, quick summary. Don't panic about mistakes. Use the words and the grammar that you already know, and don't worry about the things that you don't know yet. Right, and this brings us to our next important idea, which is listen and copy. And keep listening and keep copying and keep listening and keep copying. Okay? Right, I'm hungry. So let's go back to the sandwich shop idea. If you say something like 1 fish, 1 ham, the shop assistant might reply with something like, oh, so that's 1 tuna sandwich and 1 ham sandwich, yeah? Or when you say go, they might reply and say, oh, you want them to go? Now this is gold because this is your chance to hear the correct sentence and copy it, okay? Repeat it yourself. They say, you want them to go? You say, yes, I want them to go, okay? You've learned a new chunk, like a natural way to say something in English, and you're still using the words you know. This is exactly how I improved my Spanish. Listening and repeating, listening and repeating. And this is also what I saw when my daughters were learning how to speak. They would say something like, me cold, coat, daddy. And I would say, oh, you want your coat because you're cold? And then she would repeat, want my coat. Okay, so she just copied and learned and grew her language. And I know you're not a baby, but we all learn language the same way, so you should definitely do that too. Now, I know listening is one of the hardest things to master in English, but in that video up there, I give you 5 simple things that you can do to make it much, much easier to understand native speakers, even when they're speaking fast English. So you probably want to watch that video after this lesson, because obviously if you're listening and copying, you want to actually understand the thing that you are listening to. All right, so watch that video next. Okay, and that brings us to the next point, which is learn chunks, not individual words. So chunks are little groups of words that naturally go together. Let's have a look at the sandwich shop example again. What you really wanted to say was, could I please have a tuna sandwich and a ham sandwich to go? Okay, so one great chunk from that sentence is, could I please have... Okay, you don't need to break this into little grammar rules. You don't need to worry about modals or auxiliary verbs or word order. None of that. Just learn, could I please have, could I please have, and use that again and again and again in different situations. Could I please have a receipt? Could I please have a glass of water? Could I please have the bill? Okay, it's super useful and it works everywhere. So learn chunks because, as I said, you're not analysing the grammar, you're learning them as groups of words. And when you learn them as groups of words, you're not thinking, oh, which preposition should I use there? Which tense should that be in? No, you're learning groups of words. So when you do this, you actually avoid making mistakes because they come as a group of words. So keep listening to real English. Keep copying these chunks of words when you hear them, and that's what helps you start to think in English. And when you stop worrying about the mistakes, and when you use the words you know, and when you repeat the English you hear, when you learn in chunks, you feel much more confident speaking because you're not worried about all the things that you don't know. I remember when I had a very, very beginner level of Spanish and I was in Spain looking for one of these in a shop. I didn't know the word for it, but the shop assistant came to me and said to me, what do you want? And I remember I didn't panic. I just said, I have a lamp, I have a TV, I have one hole in the wall. He smiled, he went back, and he came back with exactly the thing that I needed. And that moment felt incredible. I was so proud of myself because I had communicated something quite complicated using very, very simple words. And of course, he told me the word for it. He said, un ladrón. And I learned the Spanish from Spain, it's un ladrón. I learned it and I will never forget that word because of that experience. And in that moment, I realized that I didn't need to think in English. I didn't need to worry about the words that I didn't know. I just needed to think of the words that I did know and use them. And as you learn more and more and become more comfortable using more and more advanced grammar and vocabulary, you'll soon get used to thinking directly in English rather than your native language. Now, let me just go back to what I said about making mistakes in English. When you're speaking, you shouldn't worry about mistakes if you are easily understood. You know, even if you say, you can subscribe if you have like this lesson, okay, the grammar is poor, but you understand what I mean. And if you do it, it will make you feel great because you've understood me. But sometimes a mistake can express a completely different idea. Like if you go to a restaurant and say to the waiter, you say, we are 5. You're not telling him the number of people in your group. What you're actually saying is that you're 5 years old, your friend is 5 years old, your dad's 5 years old, and your mum's 5 years old. That's what you're actually saying. What you actually need to say in that situation is, there are 5 of us. Okay, if you're standing there, it's maybe obvious that you're not 5 years old, but this mistake can lead to some interesting misunderstandings. And that's actually one of the huge mistakes that you need to avoid that I mention in my ebook. So yes, you definitely need to download that and stop making the mistakes I mentioned there. It's free, and when you download it, I give you access to a load of other free worksheets and lessons to take your English to an advanced level. The link is in the description, or you can scan that code to download it now. Okay, so now you know how to think in English and stop translating from your own language. Now it's time to learn the skills that will help you understand fast English easily. And I give you 5 simple steps to do that in that video there. As I said before, it's not easy to listen and copy if you don't understand what people are telling you. So thanks for watching. There's the ebook, and bye for now.